just after 5 o'clock on June 16th. We will start, as ever, with the Pledge of Allegiance and salute to the New Mexico flag in English and in Spanish, as well as our acknowledgement of tribal land. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Juro fidelidad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y a la república que representa una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures. Saludo la bandera de Nuevo México, el símbolo de amistad perfecta entre culturas unidas. And the acknowledgement of tribal land. We acknowledge that our Board of Education meeting is taking place on occupied indigenous land. We acknowledge the Tesuque Pueblo lands and other tribal lands on which we stand. We honor these people, past, present, and future. We acknowledge the history and ongoing colonization of where we are sitting right now in New Mexico and in our country. We acknowledge our own place in the story of colonization. Thank you very much. Moving on to approval of the agenda. Do we need any changes?
No changes this evening, President Noble.
Thank you, Superintendent. Is there a motion?
I move to approve.
I'll second.
Thank you, Board Member Anderson with the motion, Secretary Bozé with the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have approved the agenda. Moving on to Roman numeral 2, our executive session. Secretary Bozé.
Madam President, I would like to make a motion to move the Board of Education into executive session where we will discuss the purchase, acquisition, or disposal of real property regarding the Turquoise Trail lease, as well as collective bargaining, the NEA Santa Fe collective bargaining.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Secretary Bozé with the motion, Board Member Anderson with the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are in executive session. We will come back on or around 5:30. Thank you very much.
Okay.
come in and sit down with us and just, that'll give us an opportunity to ask them questions and
Okay.
make sure that we understand what they're bringing us.
Okay.
Next week, will a day work better for you, or
Monday, Wednesday, or Friday would work better for me.
what time?
I mean, if we want to do it whenever, I can make time for it. Yeah, let me,
Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
yeah, let me look up some of my meetings for next week. I already have them set up.
Yep, and just send me an email or tell me afterwards.
Okay. maybe not, no, showing it to people that showed up. I'll forward them to all the stakeholders now. Yeah. All right, no, but. Democrat, San Diego. And then we cover Cleveland. And then we cover APS games. We get APS. It's a lot of work, bro. Do play-by-play, post highlights afterwards on social media. So the player of the game, what kind of shirt too. That's pretty cool. Yeah. Play-by-play too? Yeah. Been doing it now for 8 years. If you want, bro. I don't know if you want to. You're interested. You don't need help, bro. If you want to, unless you want to do your own stuff. But I mean, yeah.
It's like with my car together here. My car broke down last week.
We don't start till August.
So often?
Yeah.
Oh, shoot. Yeah, definitely. I've been thinking about doing DoorDash or something.
Yeah.
Some more money probably coming in.
We pay $50 a game. $50 a game. Yeah. That's it, man. Direct deposit into your account.
That's the number in here. I'll definitely hit you up.
Yeah. Well, I figured what? 3 hours? I gotta talk to this guy real quick. Games a week. You want to do 2? You want to do 3? Just let me know. Okay. That's it. Or if you just want to do camera, you don't want to. You can do camera. You can produce, keeping score, and running commercials and stuff on the software we have. Pretty laid back. Where do you live here in Santa Fe?
Yeah, I'm right there behind Lowe's.
Oh, okay. All right. So yeah, you probably want to get care up in Santa Fe. Yeah, wanted to do it. Okay. Think about it.
Yeah. I'll definitely be giving you a call. Yeah, that'll give me a chance to get out of the house too.
Yeah.
A little bit. And it's usually during the week.
Yeah, you could go for the small. Volleyball game usually on Tuesday or Thursday, and then we'll have a football game on Friday. Maybe they might be on Saturday with St. Mike's or something. Majority of it's on Tuesday. It's either going to be on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. That's it, man. Think about it. Let me know. I'll get you a credential. The whole thing, man. I need. Yeah. Look us up. Sports Team. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and
Okay. Thanks, everyone, for your patience. We went a little over on our executive session, but, lots to talk about. Secretary Bozé, do you want to bring us back?
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to make a motion to bring the Board of Education out of executive session where we discuss the purchase, acquisition, and disposal of real property in regards to the Turquoise Trail lease, as well as collective bargaining for NEA Santa Fe, and no action was taken.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and second. All those in favor of officially coming out of executive session, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Moving on, we want to welcome our special guest tonight from the Santa Fe Police Department as well as the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office. We will also be joined, I think, for our presentation by the co-president of New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence. But thank you for being here. Appreciate it. So we'll go ahead and move on our agenda to introduction of interpreter. Superintendent.
Thank you, Board President Noble. Deputy Superintendent Romero, please.
Para asistencia con la traducción en español, la señora Bejar te ayudará.
Thank you very much, Deputy Superintendent. On to Roman numeral 4 and public forum. Superintendent.
Thank you, Board President Noble. With us tonight is our Public Information Officer, Mr. Cody Donarski.
Good evening, Board President, members of the Board, Superintendent Chavez. There is no one signed up for public forum comment tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Donarski. As ever, we have a few options for public forum comment. And I just want to ask if there's anybody here who did not get a chance to sign up for public forum who would like to address the board at this time. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on. Thank you very much. Next, we have our union update. Do we have a representative from the union here to do? Yes, please.
We will be speaking later on about the agenda.
Okay, so
Thank
you don't
you.
want to do an update right now? Okay, thank you, and thanks for being here. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to board announcements and follow-up. We have not had an audit committee meeting, as I recall, unless I did. Okay, it's next week. I'm like, did I miss it? No, thank you. There's nothing to say on the audit committee. On the community review committee update, CRC, Secretary Bozay.
Thank you, Madam President. We had a really wonderful CRC meeting last week. Lots of really good information. We got to see a presentation of all of the outdoor classrooms that have been starting to be set up, kind of the first phase. And so that was really cool to see. We got construction updates, which is always exciting, and kind of talking about the next projects on the agenda. And we will hear some of that tonight as far as some funding stuff later on in the meeting by that department. So thank you. That's it.
Okay, anything you want to add, Board Member Anderson?
I'm sorry, I was celebrating my daughter's 9th birthday at the last CRC meeting, so it is the first one I have missed, and I promise not to miss any more unless I have another birthday.
Unless absolutely necessary. No worries. Thank you. Okay, moving on to superintendent announcements and follow-up. Superintendent.
Thank you, Board President Noble, members of the board. We have a lot of special guests in the audience tonight, and Mr. Donarski will read our special guests, and we'll go down there and take some pictures with some of the award winners from this previous school year. Mr. Donarski.
Awesome. So accolades go to Jennifer Jewell, a social studies teacher at Capitol High School, who was named the 2022 Nusenda Teacher of the Year in May. Nominations, which were reviewed by the Coalition for Public Education, were submitted by students, parents, teachers, administrators, and staff. Those who nominated Ms. Jewell said she makes students feel proud. Principal Jamie Holliday said she is an asset to our school community. She is passionate about empowering students to think critically about United States history. I can grab my iPad. Next, we want to say congratulations to Robin Romero Cardenas, a special education educational assistant at Gonzales Community School, who was named the 2022 Nusenda Educational Support Professional of the Year in May. Those nominating Ms. Romero Cardenas said she wears many hats at the school. Principal Christopher Lopez said, "It's difficult to overstate how well she communicates with all stakeholders at all times. We could not function without Robin." And our deepest thanks to Nusenda for supporting outstanding teaching and learning. Next, we have our Teachers Who Inspire. 7 SFPS teachers received 2022 Teachers Who Inspire awards from Partners in Education during surprise announcements in May. Teachers are nominated by their peers for the award for their outstanding qualities in the classroom, leadership among their coworkers, and service to the community. It was thrilling to share and enjoy at the presentations. The award winners are Jacqueline Gonzalez, a kindergarten teacher at Nava Elementary School, who innovatively teaches math through hands-on activities like measuring pumpkins and counting their seeds. Next is Miss Gabrielle Kahawai, which I've learned to say after on the many awards that she's received this year, a third grade teacher at Gonzales Community School and the 2022 Milken Educator Award, who has provided invaluable help to support with technology in the classroom. Her weekend school hiking club takes students outdoors. We have Carrie Ortega, a pre-K teacher at Nina Otero Community School, who does everything possible to bring joy to learning. For her, being a teacher is magical. We have Lisa Romero, a kindergarten teacher at Nava Elementary School, whose students are inspired to learn science by doing, like when investigating how ants build trails or light refracts to create rainbows. Fumei Tai, a Mandarin teacher at Mandela International Magnet School, who brings learning to life by teaching songs to students in Mandarin, leading a Mahong club for students, organizing exchange trips to Taiwan, and teaching students how to make pork dumplings. Emily Walukas, engineering, math, and AP physics teacher at Santa Fe High School, uplifts students by sponsoring the Sexuality and Gender Acceptance Club, a gaming club, and groups supporting girls and Native American students in sciences. They prioritize student interests like robotics and 3D modeling in the classroom. And last but not least, we have Elizabeth Young, music and orchestra teacher at Gonzales Community School, truly went the extra mile by establishing an extracurricular program this year to provide violins for students. You can see her play in the Santa Fe Opera this summer. Many, many thanks to Partners in Education for shining a light on our amazing teachers. And next we have our Golden Apple Award recipient. Ortiz Middle School teacher, Ms. Stephanie Gurule-Leba, was surprised in May with a Golden Apple for Excellence in Teaching Award. Ms. Gurule-Leba, a 6th to 8th grade biomedical science teacher, while at Ortiz, is one of 7 Excellence in Teaching winners recognized statewide for working hard every day to inspire students in New Mexico classrooms. Ms. Gurule-Leba has said that teaching gives me the outlet to help my students be innovative and experience that anything is possible. That's all our awards. Yep.
I also just want to say I'm glad everybody is on summer break. And thank you all for being here.
A couple more announcements, and thank you, Mr. Donarski, and those in attendance to be recognized. 93 Santa Fe Public School students earned state seals of bilingualism and biliteracy. The 93 students, all graduating seniors, demonstrated proficiency in a language other than English, with one actually being a trilingual individual. Proficiency was demonstrated through one of 4 options: certification by a tribe, units of credit, an assessment, unit of credit, an alternative process portfolio, or an assessment and an alternative process portfolio. 71 students earned bilingual or biliteracy seals, graduated from Capitol High School. 14 students, including the trilingual student, graduated from Santa Fe High. 7 students graduated from Mandela, and 1 student graduated from ECO. In addition to those, 4 students from the Academy for Technology and the Classics Charter School also earned their bilingual or biliteracy seals. Very important announcement, upcoming job fair. The HR department is hosting a job fair this Wednesday, June 22nd, at the Toby Roybal Gym on the Santa Fe High campus. It is for all positions within Santa Fe Public Schools. We will have a representative from the Santa Fe Community College representing the program there for alternative licensure and also to assist individuals with navigating that program. And lastly, tomorrow we'll be announcing 3 new principals, a principal and assistant principal for El Dorado Community School and a principal for Salazar Elementary. So we will release those names tomorrow. And that concludes the superintendent's announcements.
Thank you very much, Superintendent. Any burning questions on the superintendent announcement? All right, we will go ahead and move on to the big item, if you will, on our agenda tonight, our presentation on Santa Fe Public Schools school safety. Superintendent, are you going to lead this off?
Thank you, Board President Noble, members of the board. Taking us through the presentation tonight is our Executive Director of Safety and Security, Mr. Mario Salbidres, Emergency Manager, Mark Lewandowski, and our Safety Aid Supervisor, Mr. Brian Rodriguez, as well as some guests.
And again, I just want to note that we have special guests from the Santa Fe Police Department. I believe we're joined by the chief himself. Really appreciate you being here, Chief, as well as representatives from the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office, Santa Fe County Under Sheriff Ken Johnson, as well as Captain Nathan Segura. So really want to appreciate the partnership that you all bring and coming here to talk with us tonight. Mr. Salbidres.
President Noble, Superintendent Chavez, board members, thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for our distinguished guests for joining us today and being part of our district, our partners as well. We've done this presentation or a similar presentation before. It's always good to come back and review what we've done, look at if we've found better or best practices. So we're going to go through this slide and show some of the items you may have already seen before, give you some discussion of items we're already looking at to better our district's safety and security procedures as well. So thank you very much. We'll get started. First and foremost, it's very important that we understand that the safety of our schools is a shared responsibility. It isn't just the responsibility of the district, the safety and security team, the principal, the assistant principals, or counselors. This is a shared responsibility not just within the Santa Fe Public School District, but it's a shared responsibility within our community, the Santa Fe County. And what we say by that is we all need all of our members in our community to be vigilant, be our eyes and ears, and let us know of any dangers or concerns that they're having within the community so we can address them. So it is truly a shared responsibility for our whole community together. On top of that, I have to thank Superintendent Chavez, the board, for taking a special interest in making safety a priority for our students. With that said, I have to speak to the members of our district that we have at the Santa Fe Public Schools. To begin with myself, I am honored to have retired from the Santa Fe Police Department as a deputy chief. I've seen some very disturbing incidents, but I've learned a lot, and I can bring that knowledge to the Santa Fe Public Schools. I also have the privilege of having Mr. Mark Lewandowski as our emergency manager, who is our captain, who retired as a captain from the Santa Fe Police Department.
We also have Mr. Brian Rodriguez, our safety aid supervisor, who also retired from the, as a lieutenant for the Santa Fe Police Department. With them too, they bring a large amount of knowledge to help me do a better job. But it doesn't stop there. We're very fortunate that our district also has other members and executives that are assisting us, such as Mr. Gabe Romero, who's the Executive Director of Facilities. He's a retired inspector for New Mexico State Police. We have Mr. Stan Mascareñas, who's the Santa Fe High School Dean of Students. He's also a retired Deputy Chief of Police from Santa Fe PD. And we have Mr. Mike Root, who's newest member to our district, who's a safety aide at one of our schools, who retired as a police officer. So we have a number of people that we can call on for assistance and guidance when we run into a dilemma or a conflict that we try to resolve together. On that, some of the topics that we're going to discuss tonight include our district-approved safety plan, our layered approach to safety, our safety aids, the Sandy Hook Promise, threat of harm to others assessment, the Raptor screening and drill management system that we have in place, emergency supplies in the classroom at the schools, and personal protective equipment, our RAVE panic button, stop the bleed program that we have, the RhinoWare, our mandatory reporting by New Mexico State, and our law enforcement partners. We'll begin with our New Mexico approved safe school plan. All of our schools, 29 of them to include ATC, have an approved state plan. This plan was generated not just through my department, the student wellness with Director O'Brien was a major component of this. We also had our partners participate and give us guidance on how to respond to critical incidences. It is a tactical plan, so it is a protective plan. New Mexico PED asks us and requires us to protect that plan because it is tactical in nature, that we don't want everything that's in there to be general knowledge or open knowledge to everybody, so that the people who have ill will towards us do not get an upper hand on how we respond to emergencies. We'll get into some of the requirements that the New Mexico requires us for emergency drills, and we'll do a side-by-side comparison in just a minute. So New Mexico requires us to do a shelter in place and response to active shooter. This is within the first 4 weeks of school. It requires us to do an evacuation, also within the first 4 weeks of school. We have to do 2 fire drills within the first 4 weeks of school as well, and then we finish it up with 2 more fire drills, and then it allows us to select 2 additional drills that we want to practice with our staff and students at each school. With the authority and the blessing of the Superintendent Chavez, we have our requirements exceed what the state asks. And I'm going to ask you to you can look at the first set of items that are on there, but we're going to touch on those again. And I'll ask you to go to the third to the last item, and we'll discuss that a little bit more. These are not drills such as the first week of school site emergency team. So each school has to select a principal, an assistant principal, emergency team that when an incident happens, they get together and come up with the plan. They follow our protocols to evacuate, to do a fire drill, whatever it is. So the first week, we asked them to review the threat of harm to others form, which I'll discuss a little bit later. We get familiar with this threat of harm to others. The second week of school, the school staff in general, everybody reviews the lockdown procedures. We need to have them understand how to activate a lockdown and move their way through a lockdown from start to finish. So we want them to know that before we actually exercise a lockdown at the school. On the 4th week of school, staff and teachers do an inventory of an emergency bag. These emergency bags exist in every single classroom to include the principal and front office. And I'll get into that a little bit later, later on in the presentation. Now we'll talk about the ones I asked you to, excuse me. Well, the slide's missing. So on a side-by-side comparison to what the state requires us, as I explained, they ask us to do 1 shelter in place. The district actually does 2 shelters in place, and we do something unique. We do 1 shelter in place during a passing period. When I first began with the district 4 years ago, one of the biggest questions or challenges to me was, well, we know what to do when we're in the classroom, but our students don't know what to do when they're passing the hallways in the playground or lunch. So I said, that's a very good challenge, that we should educate our students on what to do. So we start practicing a shelter in place and a lockdown drill during passing periods, so we get our students and staff to start thinking what is the best response during an emergency of this nature during this period of time. We do 1 evacuation. We copy the 4 fire drills that were required, and we do, like I said, 2 lockdown drills, 1 during passing period as well. What we're enacting this year, we tried a couple of years ago and we weren't able to get it off the ground, is we want to do a reverse fire drill to lockdown. That sounds odd, right? Well, a reverse fire drill, as we've seen historically around the nation, is the bad person may pull the fire alarm to draw everybody out thinking there's a fire, but it isn't a fire. So we need to teach our students and staff, what do we do if we have to call a lockdown while the fire alarm's going off? Normally, we as humans, we go back to the place we came from. We want to teach them that's not the best practice. We go to the first available, safest location to take lockdown or shelter. And we have to practice that. It's unfortunate, but it's something that we've identified as a team that it exists, and we need to prepare ourselves for such. So the way we approach school safety, we do it in a layered approach. We have the exterior layer, the first layer, which is the site. Then we have the building exterior, and then we have the building interior. Each one has a component that tries to set up a layer, an obstacle for a bad person or a person with ill intent to come in. Such items that include there are cameras, fencing and gates, single points of entry, screening system, and of course the biggest one is staff vigilance, just watching what's our surroundings, reporting back suspicious activity. And the large one for us, and we really appreciate, is our law enforcement partners that help us out. These are some of the examples of the layers that we have at the schools, just for an illustration. We'll get into a few of them more. And we also started the program of the safety aids, which I've presented to you all before. We've continued to grow that program. I will report today, Superintendent Chavez, we've done some interviews. We recommend it's for hire. We have 4 vacancies and 1 lead position vacant that we have. We do have 2 applicants for our lead position. So we're getting some interest, some nice results out of that in the interviews. Someone's coming back is they came back and explained to us how they didn't realize how much of an impact they had until parents started talking to them out at the stores and saying, my kid told me about this, you treated him like this. These are our safety aids. And we were trying to build that our safety aids were not just guards. They were someone that they could go to, a student can go to, ask for help. And that safety aid also knew, that's beyond my ability, but I know that, Counselor X knows how to handle that. I can do a soft handoff to that counselor to get that student the help that they need. It may be a family issue, it may be a boyfriend-girlfriend issue, we don't know, but we can at least direct them into the right person to help them out. So I think it's successful. We're going in that direction very well, and I am eager to continue and see the outcome at the end. Just to touch on it, we do have 11 total schools with safety aids. We have 1 safety aid supervisor as stated, 3 lead safety aids, and 22 safety aids to make up the team.
And Mr. Salvi, just so I can add, if you remember when we presented the safety aid program, it was because we're having issues with our contractor providing enough staffing for it.
Thank you, Superintendent Chavez. And here is the component where I said the safety of schools is a shared responsibility. It's everybody's. I've harped on this. I will stay on this because I think it's great to say something. We have a principal in here that knows this, that I do not discourage anybody reporting, any student reporting anything. It's kind of comical a bit. I have a set of girls from that school who have a friendship conflict sometimes, and I'll reach out to the principal and say, your girls are arguing again, and I'll take care of it. And then another girl who they say, well, so-and-so is being mean to me and told my friends not to be friends with me, so-and-so forth. I sent him. I've already talked to the principal. I said, I'm not discouraging that kind of submission because it's getting them prepared and comfortable with reporting to us, right? So when it's really serious, they're going to feel comfortable and tell us about it and not be scared. So it's fine with me that we're having little friendship conflicts being reported. We'll deal with them, we'll pass them on, and it's working perfectly good. So for the general public, I really encourage that it's not just for our staff or students to say something. Anybody can report on this platform. The say something can be accessed through a phone number, a website, or an app. Once you submit a tip, it goes to a center that is monitored 24 hours, 7 days a week. It is a number of different battery sets of questions are asked. Once it's completed, it is routed to either ourselves, or if it's imminent threat or danger, it is routed to our partners, our law enforcement partners. A big example, on a weekend, on Sunday, we had a runaway who was in danger. One of her friends decided to report it. We applaud that. Told us about the danger. By the time I called dispatch, dispatch was already aware of it as well, the emergency dispatch. So we all worked as a team to make sure that this particular student that we had on break was okay still. They found her, she was safe, and so forth. So we welcome any type of report that you'd like to give us. Big or small, it's big to us if it was important enough for you to report it to us. So this is the threat of harm assessment to others with Director Sue O'Brien. This is when we learn of an individual, a student who has made a threat to a particular person, the school in general. It's a battery of questions that we welcome the principal, coaches, teachers the student is very close to come together and answer all these questions. What type of support systems does this student have? How big of a threat is it? How plausible is it that they're going to follow through with the threat towards the school or a particular student or a group of students? Then they're classified from low, medium, and high, and we provide a response or a proactive plan to address this problem and hopefully prevent it. In that, school does all this. They brought it over to Director O'Brien and myself. We review it, not for questioning or anything, but see if we can support the school and the action plan from the district level. So we get these regularly, not as often as anybody would think, because we do have a good conflict resolution program with the restorative justice, which I think is amazing as well. So the Raptor screening system that we use at Santa Fe Public Schools will also segue into how do we manage all these drills that we're requiring in every school. So the Raptor screening system is screens for registered sex offenders. It can manage release of students to parents or guardians, and we can flag unwanted visitors. And the way we've managed release of students, we can enter into the system who should be picking up a student and who should not. We know that there's problems and conflicts sometimes within families and their restraining orders. So we can put this information in there if we have to leave campus and identify who's not supposed to be picking up little Johnny or little Susie or so forth. So it's a good system. And then the last thing is, since we figured the schools have gotten comfortable with using the Raptor, why don't we use the next component to help them facilitate the drill mandatories that we're having on them. So under this program, we have the managed emergency drills, and I'll explain a little bit about that. In this system, Mr. Lewandowski creates the yearly drills that are required for the district. He then puts them into the system and says, during month X, you are going to do an evacuation. So day number 1 of the month to the end of the month, it'll say you have to do it between these times, and this is the drill. We stay uniform across the district, so every school who's doing a drill that month will be doing the same drill. So if we have questions or concerns, it's probably the same questions or concerns coming up from all the schools, so we have a very uniform response to their questions and concerns. The greatness about this program is every beginning, the first day of every month, it sends out an email to the principals and assistant principals and says, just as a reminder, this is the month of September, you're going to be doing a fire drill this month. And then midpoint of that month, if the drill still has not been completed, it'll send out another email, just a reminder, you only have 15 days left to complete this fire drill. So it's a way to help support the staff who's very busy to make sure that we comply with our district mandatory drills, plus the state's. So here's the emergency supplies with the emergency bag. Every classroom in the principal's office has this red bag. This is just a very small amount of items that are in there, but they consist of a roster, a unification roster, a map, some small first aid kits, some water, a blanket, and so forth. In the classroom, if we have to be in there for a lockdown for long periods of times, we provided them with the lockdown bucket. So when we go speak to the kids and say, what's a lockdown bucket? How do I use it? I say, just think about if we go camping and there's no restroom. This is your restroom. So you're going to be like camping in your classroom. So this is going to be your restroom if you really, really need to go. And we show them it does have a toilet seat, has a liner, has an absorbent, and so forth. So we try to make it as comfortable and meet all their needs when unfortunately they have to be in a lockdown situation. And the rave panic button, which many of you might be familiar with, I've tasked this year Mr. Rodriguez to help me encourage the middle school, the K-8s, to jump on board a little bit more with this rave panic button. We were the second ones 1 month behind ASTIC of piloting the rave panic button. Then shortly thereafter, about a year or so, the state jumped on board and cut our cost. First, we were paying for it. Then the state said, we're covering the rave panic button for everybody across the state who wants to use, every district that wants to use it. We've continued to use it. I think we take that advantage of expanding it to whichever schools they want, but definitely K-8s, middle schools, and high schools, because it's free. So we should take advantage of that. Our high schools have bought into it, Santa Fe High, Eco, Capital, the biggest ones. We tested it with them. We found our hiccups. We trip, stumble, and fall, as they say. We got up and figured it out, and now we're ready to go and push it down into the lower levels because we've learned a lot on how to use the program itself. And then across the state, if I'm not mistaken, we are the first district to actually place in our school the Stop the Bleed. Now, Stop the Bleed, which is right up here, is a not for small cuts, but we're talking big cuts, big wounds that are bleeding. And in here, we have tourniquets, blood clot, a number of different things. The problem that we were having when we started researching this is how do we train 2,000 plus employees to use a tourniquet? Not everybody's used the tourniquet. Well, we found this company out of Colorado who actually develops an app. And the app is updated to the best practice medical practices when they do come out. And in the app, you just simply open the app. It asks you a series of questions to include. Take a deep breath, call 911, put on the gloves. All that is in here, right? And then it says, is the person bleeding? And it tell them yes, you'll identify where. And it'll tell you, get the tourniquet. Well, what does a tourniquet look like? In the kit, it will tell you A1, and it's labeled A1. And then it goes through the process of how to use the tourniquet. So we are the first district that I'm aware of, and I've looked and asked all over the place, to actually deploy these throughout our schools. Some of our schools have more than one because of their size, and I'm proud to expand it if necessary. And I hope they go to waste. To be honest, I hope we never, ever have to use them, but they're there in case. The RhinoWare. Thanks to my predecessor, Mr. Romero, we were the first in the state to install RhinoWare locks. These locks are amazing. Since then, the state has followed suit. Española has followed suit. It's another device. The way I explain it to our teachers of why we need it, I tell them, look at the door. On one side of the door, you have three points of strength, which are your hinges. And then on the opposite side, you have 1 point of strength, which is just in the middle, creating two weaknesses at the top and the bottom of that door. We eliminate one more weakness at the bottom. Now we have only one at the top, which is extremely hard, and law enforcement will tell you, in breaching doors, to try to break a door open by sledgehammering the top of that door. So we've fortified that door's ability to keep our students and staff safe behind closed doors during an emergency. So I'm very proud that we have these out there, and we've expanded beyond classrooms. We've gone into offices and so forth, and we'll continue as requests come through. And one of the last things here is obviously the mandatory reporting. This is a state law requirement. This is our proactive approach to make sure that our students are not just safe at school, but they're safe at home as well, and they're not put in any environment that's dangerous. And if it is questionable, that we as school employees will report this to the state. And one other item here is we, as a department, continue to look for new ideas, new innovations, new ways to do our job better. We are exploring AI, which is artificial intelligent cameras, because we can't have a person everywhere at every time. We have open fields such as Santa Fe High, Capital High School, that we can't monitor all the time with a staff member. So we're looking at AI, which the camera will tell us between this period and this period, nobody should be out there. And if somebody's out there, please tell us. They can identify a car or a human and avoid identifying a prairie dog or a wolf or anything of that nature. It only tells about what we want to see and know about. You've all seen intercoms. We are upgrading our intercom system. No more of this push. I don't know who's behind the mic talking. We have a new AI phone that is interactive. So when you push the button, if you've been to Wood Gormley, if you've been to Acequia Madre, you push the button, the secretary, the principal is actually looking at you and speaking to you and knows who's there. So you can be screened before you're led into the school. I've discussed it with Superintendent Chavez. I've asked for his blessing if he would like me to look at expanding this throughout the district. At this point, we're in exploratory phases to see how we could do that. The complicated situation with this would be Santa Fe High and Capital, which has always been our most difficult because they're the largest schools. But I've also seen principals asking us to look into them and apply it to their school. And the last part is our law enforcement partners. We have the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Department, Sheriff Adon Mendoza, Under Sheriff Johnson, Captain Segura. We have the Santa Fe Police Department with Chief Paul Joy. We also have a good working relationship with New Mexico State Police Chief Tim Johnson, which if he ever watches this, he may laugh. I was his field training officer before he was chief, and he wrecked my car. Okay. And JPO Officer Andrea Sandoval, we have a great working relationship. I've had the distinct pleasure of working with or alongside our local law enforcement partners. In doing so, I know our law enforcement partners are willing, ready, and able to respond to any critical or imminent threat that may arise in today's society. But don't take that from me. I welcome our law enforcement partners, the Santa Fe Police Department and Sheriff's Office, to address any questions, concerns the Santa Fe Public School Board of Education may have.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Chief. Do you want to make a few comments?
Sure. Hi there. I'm going to apologize for a lack of etiquette with regard to my first school board meeting. So happy to be here under the unfortunate circumstances. But whenever we see an incident in the country and in the state that shocks the conscience, especially one that involves police in some form or fashion, it's not uncommon for a lot of questions to be asked, and a lot of, could that happen here? What does our police department do? How does our police department handle something like that? And obviously the most recent incident in Uvalde caused a lot of concerns and questions and what ifs and what happens for us here in Santa Fe. And obviously this is a public forum, so I'm gonna kind of echo Mr. Saavedra's comments about being cognizant of tactics and training and all of that. What I can say with confidence is what we saw with the police department response in Uvalde would not happen here. That's not how we operate, that's not how we train, that's not what I expect of my officers or myself. We train often, we have weapons systems and body armor and a number of other things to keep ourselves prepared from top to bottom, including myself, from our cadets to me. So in such an event, if such an event were to happen here, and I happen to be the closest one, then I'm going. The rank is irrelevant. It is a direct threat. If our partners in the sheriff's office, if an event, because I know there's schools in the Santa Fe public school system that are out in the county. If an incident occurs that requires an immediate response, and we are aware of it, we are going. State police is going. When we talk about the relationships that we have, and not just an operational relationship, but an information sharing relationship with ourselves, Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office, New Mexico State Police, and also the FBI in our local office here. And so we meet often, we share information, and we work together very well. Mr. Saavedra, I've worked with him, I've worked for him. Mark Lewandowski, same. You have a great staff and security team here. The work that they do and the communications that we have back and forth, I can say with the utmost confidence that you have a professional and rapid response in the hopefully never to happen event here. But we are ready, our partners are ready, and yeah, if you have any questions for me, I'll step back and let the undersheriff speak, but if I need me to hang out and address some other things, I'm happy to do so.
Thank you, Chief. Welcome, Undersheriff.
Thank you, Chief. Madam President, Superintendent Chavez, and members of the board. On behalf of the sheriff, you know, our sentiments are the same. Our staff understands the expectations when there's a critical incident and their response, they will respond and and address any situation, you know, and we work on making sure that our deputies have the tools they need. We just ordered some ballistic shields for our deputies. That way they have the equipment they need to make entry, if need be, to any building or school. So I think from our standpoint, I think that one of the most important things is collaboration and communication. And I think that we're in a really good spot right now with the schools, being that you have these individuals with tremendous law enforcement experience, and we've all worked together for years, and so it's as easy as picking up a phone and staying in communication. We worked closely with Mr. Salvidrez to visit all the schools in the district and meet with principals and other staff and build those relationships. That way, in the event that there's an incident, we have those relationships built and we're able to respond and take care of the situation at hand. But thanks for inviting us. We appreciate being here, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you being here. Questions, comments from the board?
Board President Noble?
Go ahead, Board Member Anderson.
Would it be possible to go, as we've done before, slide by slide,
Sure.
to talk through our questions?
Sure, yeah.
Thank you. Perfect.
Start at the beginning.
Let's do it. All right, sorry, I do have some questions. The first one is on the 2022 New Mexico approved SFPS safety plan slide. It's a few slides in. Does anyone have any questions prior to that? Thank you.
Slide 5, yeah.
Yeah, slide 5, thank you. Oh, I see it here, perfect. I just had a question. So the shelter-in-place drills, or really all drills, do these happen with all ages? Do they happen at NIE with the 3-year-olds and our pre-K students as well?
Board President Noble, Superintendent Chavez, board member, that is correct, but we do take into consideration the age of the child. We don't do the same level of drill that we would do at the high school. I am 100% interested in speaking to the principal, as we did before, where we walk those students through a little bit kinder, a little bit more understanding of their understanding of age, right? What are they comprehending? So we want them to understand what we're doing, but not scare them. So yes.
Thank you so much.
And do we have, sort of on that topic, any feedback from students and/or parents as to, I'd imagine it's a hard needle to thread as to preparation versus scaring kids with drills? Do we, hear from kids and iterate and improve?
Superintendent, President Noble, Superintendent Chavez, we have heard, but the most concerning one, the parent that has brought to my attention, was our off-site evacuation. They were upset that we were making Santa Fe High School students walk from Santa Fe High to the community center, the Chavez Community Center. They felt that it was putting them in danger. It was a lot of them. So we went away from off-site evacuation, but we still do an on-site evacuation to prepare them, and we still have the safe school plan that requires us to identify off-site evacuations and learn the route and understand the route to get there. I think we do a good job of practicing and getting out of the building, getting 350 feet away from the building. And if we had to expand that to a larger scale evacuation to another site, it's always been our practice that we use the safety measures, traffic control devices that are already on the street to do proper crossing of roadways and so forth. So that is one change that I did make. I did think about it and say, well, we don't want to injure one of our students or staff members when we're trying to do a drill. So let's see if we can achieve the accomplished goal, not going to that extent.
Thank you. Do you want to keep going, Board Member Anderson?
Thank you. I do have thank you, Board President Noble, Superintendent, members of the board. I have a question on slide 7. I don't know if anyone has anything before that. I love the idea, I hate the idea of having to do shelter-in-place drills, but I do, having the reality, I really like the idea of doing it during the passing period. Are there directives towards the students? Do they know what to do if they're in the bathroom or in the hallway, you know, going from one to the library or to the bathroom? Should there be a shelter-in-place drill?
So we did create a video a few years ago that it is up on the website. It is open to any of the family members who want to view it. It does go through various of these scenarios. What do we do during a lockdown drill? We turn off our phones, we remain silent, we turn off lights, we stay out of sight. We practice and encourage them to do the exact same if they have to be in a bathroom. Out of sight, out of mind. We go as far as when we visit schools, when there's a bathroom in the classroom and it has an automatic flush, to talk to the parents, the teachers and the students and say, you're in here and this has an automatic flush. The last thing you want to know here is the flushing of a toilet. So we tell them, what would you do to avoid that? And we make them think, and then we give them solutions to that problem, right? Such as wetting the toilet paper and putting it over the sensor. So the sensor thinks there's somebody there at all times and it won't flush accidentally on you. So we do give them ideas, solutions and so forth that we want them to carry if they have to hide in a bathroom, in a closet, or et cetera.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you. I do have another question on Site 8. The cameras, are they inside and outside, or does it vary site to site?
President Noble, Superintendent Chavez, board member. Under Sheriff Johnson wanted to address the last question really quick. Can we go to that real quick?
Sure, thanks.
Hi, thank you, and Madam President, Superintendent Chavez, and members of the board. The Santa Fe County made a huge investment with the Sheriff's Office in regards to a training simulator that we purchased this past year, and it's now operational. And it's a virtual training system which has 3 large screens, and there's thousands of training scenarios that the instructors can bring up, and some of them are in schools for deputies, and they're live and they're realistic and give the deputies the best training that is out there. And so I thought that was important to share with you. But we have been putting our personnel through that training, and it's it's a good tool to have. And we're open to sharing that with our law enforcement partners in town. Another thing that we got from the schools when we were visiting each school were maps of the different schools, and we've downloaded those into our CAD system, and so that the deputies, when they do get calls at certain schools or in the community, they can pull those maps up and have a better idea of where the entry points and things like that. So all those things will help us in our response.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Go ahead.
Does the security team have access to the cameras? I know I've seen at various school sites that, for example, the secretary at the front can see, on the screen, various school sites. Are you able to, do those just go to the school, or are you able to see them as well?
President Noble, Superintendent Chavez, board member. My team and select members of particular schools have full access to those cameras. My team has full access to every school, every camera we have out in the district. And to answer your previous question that you had asked, we have cameras inside, outside. We work with the principals to identify problem areas or areas of concern. That's where Mr. Lewandowski comes into play, and he goes and vets that concern, says, that's a logical concern. Let's go ahead and add a camera, see which one best fits, or let's upgrade a camera that does a better job for us, because maybe 6 years ago that was the best camera, and today it's not, so we upgrade those things, so yes.
Great, thank you so much.
And on that point, does law enforcement have access to the cameras if they need it?
President Noble, they do. Santa Fe Police Department does have access to Santa Fe High School and Capitol High School. In discussions with the Major Gonzalez with the Sheriff's Department, we would like to move forward with the Regional Emergency Communications Center having viewing access to any of the schools, because I think it's very prudent for us to allow our first responders the knowledge by dispatch, being able to see what's happening at a school and giving them direction We have, let's say, an active shooter response or something, and the dispatch can log into the school and communicate back to law enforcement and say, well, everything looks normal. The kids are playing ball in the gym, this and that. That may lead us to believe it's a hoax, right? Or the dispatch can come back and say, I have staff and students running everywhere trying to hide. We do have a situation. So that is in the works. We're hopefully can expand that with the blessing of Superintendent Chavez.
Thank you. Do you mind if I, thank you so much, Board President Noble. The single point of entry, I've noticed at a few schools that I've visited that at the point of entry, the door that's locked or, just that area, that there's glass sometimes in the doors, or sometimes there's even a window, between the secretary and the hallway. How do we secure those places where there is glass?
So there are different, apologize, President Noble, Superintendent Chavez. There are other products that we're exploring. 3M makes a film that's bullet resistant, okay? And disregard the whole bulletproof. And the deputy and the chief would tell us that is not existent. It's bullet resistant. And if we feel it's a vulnerability, that big of a vulnerability, then we can explore and go into that direction. We haven't found that yet. And what we're trying to do is create time and distance from the threat. I think we have that in place right now. And we're making some improvements at other sites that I feel it's a little short, but we're going to get there even. But that is something we have been discussing with Mr. Romero as well and my team on future possibly installation of that if we need to.
Thank you so much. And just to say, first of all, Mr. Selbudris, I so appreciate your diligence and your attention to detail. This is, I really appreciate it. And these questions are only just to satisfy, the spaces where I have questions.
Board Member Anderson, on
Yes.
the single point of entry, if I
Yes.
may.
Yes.
One of the things that I think a few of us got a few emails about after the Uvalde tragedy is the sort of laxness potentially in the system on the single point of entry and how that works. Do we have a sort of vigilance of reminding school site personnel to check IDs to keep that single point of entry secure? Because that seemed to be something that the community was noticing, that some of the protocols had slipped throughout the school year.
President Noble, that's an excellent comment, and I agree with you. I discussed it with the Superintendent Chavez that the biggest component to making errors or causing deficiencies is the human, is the person. We leave a door open, we leave it propped open. It's only for 10, 15 seconds, it's not a big deal. So what I propose to the superintendent for our Leadership Institute is let's get back to basics. Let's get back to basics with these principles and system principles and tell them we enforce single points of entry. We enforce our locked doors beyond the office. And I do have the camera systems, as I explained to a lot of the members, a lot of the staff here. I choose different schools day after day if I have to work in my office to randomly rotate through the cameras. I have, and you will attest that Ms. Chavez-Williams, no fault of hers, a staff member does it, that I've actually called her when she was at Cesar Chavez and I said, your door's left open, Ms. Chavez, go close it, please, and she'll go close it. She didn't cause it. Someone else, a visitor or something, felt it easy to just prop it open because they're going to carry 1 or 2 boxes through, and then they don't close it on us. So, yes, we do watch them. My staff as well has their own monitors in various locations of the office, and Superintendent Chavez will tell you, we have television screens all over the place, and they're meant for that. So we are that overwatching eye, not to say I got you, but to help you stay safe.
And just to add, during our Leadership Institute, if you remember, we've combined it with principals and also their secretaries. So as we spoke, part of the training is going to be to both groups, right? So we can make sure that they're following those safety protocols. And just to add to that, Mr. Selby just reminded district staff as well when we're holding PD to make sure that we have a single point of entry, we're monitoring. So he does remind not only sites but also district staff. So he does a great job of that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please
so
continue.
much. Thank you. My next question is on slide 10. Does anyone have any questions before then? Okay, thank you. I had questions about the 11 total schools. I guess it's sort of a two-part question. How have we identified the schools that have safety aids versus schools that don't? And is there a goal to have a safety aid at every school?
President Noble, Superintendent Chavez, board member. The decision of the schools was made prior to my time. I'm sure it was a good vetting process. Mr. Romero probably went through. I think, unless I'm mistaken, Mr. Romero, please stop me. I think it all depends, and if you'd like to come up here, it's fine. Depending on the age group, I've noticed K-8 because there's middle school there, middle school because obviously middle school students, and then high school students. I will finish off, and before I hand it off to Mr. Romero, is if you want a safety aid at every school, that would be a board decision, a superintendent direction, and we would work in that direction if you like.
Thank you.
Mr. Romero, please.
Yes, Gabe Romero, the Executive Director of Operations, board members, Superintendent, President Noble. The decision to have safety or security guards at different locations kind of evolved over the years. So initially we had probably like 5 or 6 at Santa Fe High School and at Capitol High School, and the middle schools thought, well, we need safety aids too, so we expanded that to our middle schools, and then of course next the K through 8s were requesting safety aids. And when I left that position, that's where we were at. We did not have safety aids or security guards at the elementary schools. I think some of it was financially, whether we could afford that in the operational budget, but it was also a thought process at the time of where were the most likely incidents to happen at that time period. Well, we know better now that they happen everywhere. So I think we have to continue to evolve and adapt to the changing environment, right? So that's a good question. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Secretary Bose.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent. Board Member Anderson asked my first question that was on that page. But then I was also wondering if Mr. Salvidres would just talk a little bit more about the safety aid program. And the superintendent mentioned that we moved from the contractor scenario, and we had a great presentation on that a few months ago. But I'm hoping that more of the community is watching and listening tonight, and just the important parts of the change that was made in bringing that process in-house.
Certainly. President Noble, Superintendent Chavez, board member. First and foremost, what we had is we had a difficulty having the contract company staff our needs. It started with one company. We moved on and went off to an RFP. The second company, they fell into the same problems. Another observation was a lot of the staff that they were sending were they were there, but they were not vested into the students, the community of that school. They weren't part of it. They didn't feel they were part of it. So they weren't going above and beyond the service that we were asking for. So prior to Mr. Rodriguez come on board, me and Mr. Lewandowski sat together and we said, how do we find solutions to our problems? Because that's what we're here for. We have a problem, we need to find a solution. We started to explore the safety aid program, and we said, well, how are we going to scale this? What do we want from it? And we started writing down, what do we want the outcomes to be? Well, we want the safety aid to say, this is my school. If you go to Mr. Cano from Capitol High School, he will tell you, this is my school. He's the lead at Capitol High School. Nothing happens here that I don't know about, and all the kids know me and they can come to me. I've been present where students have walked up to Mr. Cano and said, there's going to be a fight over there. And Mr. Cano right away goes. They've gotten that trust with him. That's what we wanted to build, is to build a partnership with this individual to that community, so the staff and the students felt that it's not just the principal, the assistant principal, the social worker, the teachers. Now you have an individual who's walking the halls, and at any given time you can run into that individual and give them your problems, ask for help, ask for solutions, or just simply speak to them. Sometimes you just want to talk. So we wanted to be a member who was more part of Santa Fe Public School District, who felt a part of it and actually wanted to be here. Unlike a contract company who, well, this is my job today, I may get moved tomorrow. No, this is yours. These kids are going to depend on you, and you're going to be part of this community. So you may run into them at Dillard's. You may want to run into them at Chick-fil-A. So let's do the best we can for them. In a nutshell, that's I can get into the weeds about it, but that was the higher sight that we were trying to achieve.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think I really wanted to highlight the part that it's for and by the community. that those are their neighbors, those are people that are invested in the well-being of the students that are there. It's not something that's meant to target anyone. It's really a true partnership, and I just thought it was such a wonderful presentation, and I really appreciate the approach. Thank you.
I want to underline that and this community approach and knowing the schools and knowing who's who. And as some of you know, I had a very personal experience with this recently, in that my son received a prank call that threatened literally to shoot up his school. And that happened on a Saturday evening. It was through a prank service. I notified the superintendent. I'm sure Mr. Salbrides was involved pretty immediately. And we ended up spending, and the school principal was involved. I think folks at the school were involved. And it was very clear that there was some good knowledge of what was going on, some understanding of my son's dynamic in the school, some of the kids there. We ended up spending, I think I wrote this to you, Chief, we ended up spending a couple hours with the officer who was involved, who had been to the school. And I asked him questions for a long, long time. And I cannot say enough good things about that experience, our interface with the Santa Fe Police Department, the response from the school community, the knowledge on the ground around what was going on that really did, and really did make us feel as safe as we could in sending my child to school the next day. And it was because of the on-the-ground community knowledge. This was not happening in a vacuum. This was happening in a community with an officer who was born and raised in Santa Fe and knew lots of people. I mean, there was just everything about it, except for the incident itself, was incredibly encouraging. And, you know, it's the sort of thing, and it was made very clear to me by everyone I spoke to that this is why we never take anything as a joke. Every incident, every prank call is taken very, very seriously. And, you know, again, just the community knowledge and response really did help in what was a pretty distressing moment. So I really want to thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, Mr. Salbrides. Thank you, Chief. And everybody. I know, I don't even know who all was involved in that, but it was as good an experience as something like that can be. Please keep going.
Thank you, Board President Noble. My next question is on slide 11. And you answered my first question, which was where does the information go to? And that was really reassuring to hear where all of the information goes. My question, and maybe it's for the superintendent, you guys can decide, but I noticed that it's publicized on each school's website that there's a link to the Say Something, but I didn't see it on the main page, and maybe it was just hard for me to find. But I wonder if there's a possibility of making sure that on our main page, the sfps.info, that is there. And then I wonder just how else it's publicized. How do I mean, obviously, if we have young people using it to report on their friendship conflicts, then somebody knows about it. But I wondered how it's publicized to students and parents and teachers.
Right. Thank you, Board Member Anderson. And we'll take a look at that. Mr. Donarski and I will look at our website. And we have a great way of disseminating information through our multiple platforms, right? Remind, our social media platforms, and we'll continue to investigate better ways. One of the things that we did do this school year, Mr. Salvidres and I, we presented to the Gonzales community on this Say Something app. And so maybe just communicating a little broader and having maybe public forums, virtual forums, and not specific to a community, but have it for anyone who wants to attend would really help promote this program.
Thank you so much.
Superintendent Chavez, if I may expand a little bit on that. Our students and our staff also have it on their class link. As soon as you log into your class link, there is a little icon that says Say Something. which they can click on. We also have a lot of decals, a lot of stickers around the school that promotes it. And we've also got a commitment from the county, Ms. Segura, if I'm not mistaken, to go ahead and put it on their county website, to go ahead and promote it to our Santa Fe County. So we're trying to push it out there as far as we can so everybody can use it. Like I said, no tip is non-important. Every tip is important. As I was in the police department, if it's important for you to report it to me, it's important for me to at least review it.
Thank you so much. That's really heartening to hear how it's disseminated. Yes.
On the Sandy Hook promise section, something that I came across in the last few weeks was really that the Sandy Hook Promise website is full of different programs, and the Say Something program is just one of the programs that they have available. And it's geared more towards, grades 4 or 6 through 12, depending on how the program works. But they have a younger age program that's called Start With Hello that works with teaching kids how to counteract social isolation, and it seemed like a lot of really good social emotional stuff that I thought might be interesting to look into. And then they have a student-led club as well. So there's a wealth of information on that website beyond just the Say Something program as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Would you like me to continue, Board President Noble?
You're doing fabulous.
Okay,
Yes,
thanks.
keep going.
Thank you so much. I just had a comment on slide 13, which I think is actually a comment on the presentation leading up to this point, that I just wanted to say how much I appreciate the work that you put into prevention, to preventing these incidents. I think that work is incredibly important, and I appreciate that it's part of our overall security plan to ensure that we don't need the other systems if we are able to prevent these incidents. So I just wanted to say thank you for that work. My next question isn't until slide 17.
I have a question on slide 14 on the Raptor system. And that is that one of the other concerns that I've heard over the last few weeks from our constituents is about the system, the Raptor system being down, and that seems to happen fairly frequently. And I was wondering what the protocol was when that happens.
President Noble, Superintendent Chavez, board member. The protocol is if the system is to go down, they're supposed to notify, submit a school due so we can go and facilitate the correction of the system if it's such. I will admit that because of COVID, social distancing requirement, all this, we do have to become a little more flexible, if the superintendent remembers. But there came a time early start of this year, I went back to the superintendent and cabinet and said, we got to get back to our use of all these programs here. We need to get back. We can't keep operating this way. So again, getting back to basics, part of our Leadership Institute is the mandatory use of the Raptor system. The re-encouragement or the encouragement for staff at the schools that if it's down, we're here for you, we will get there. We are, I don't operate my department, nor do my staff operate, that we don't try to answer your problems through a phone call at our office. If we need to, we'll be there for you at the school, correct you, walk you through it, and get you back up and running. We have a great working relationship with facilities, with technologies. If we can't do it, we reach out to them and ask them for help. Dr. Neal, Ms. Wagner, they'll bend over backwards to get us the help we need when we need it so we can get the school back up and running.
So are visitors not allowed in during that time? Is there an alternative way of logging visitors into the school?
President Noble, Superintendent Chavez, board member, there is, we always revert back to the old-fashioned name, log in, so on and so forth, but at least we know who's there until we get the system back up and running. Once we get the system back up and running, the secretary or staff member can enter that individual manually now into the system. If there is a problem, we're here to help out, facilitate, and correct that problem with that individual if he or she should not be in the schools. But we also keep taking consideration that some registered sex offender could have a student in our school district. So we're not going to say no to them. We're just going to take additional measures to ensure they finish the business they have to do at their school for the betterment of their student or their child, but also keeping in mind all the other students that are in there.
And is there a check when someone signs in, say, to make sure that they're not a non-custodial parent or something like that coming to get their kid when they're not allowed to do that?
President Olmos, Superintendent Chavez, board member, there's 2 checks. We have Power School, which is the start, where if there is a conflict within the family and somebody's not supposed to have the child or doesn't have custody of the child, it's in there. And we have the secondary model here with the Raptor that we can enter that as well into there. So we kind of have a checks and balances against each other to make sure that we don't make that mistake.
Okay, thank you.
Keep going.
Does anyone have any questions before slide 17, before I ask my question? Okay. I do. Oh, okay, great. Sorry, I was drinking. Thank you, President Noble, members of the board, superintendent. I was just curious on page 16, like how often on like an annual basis are these emergency supply kits used? Are there lockdown situations where we've had to use those?
So President Noble, Superintendent Chavez, I will, board member, I will tell you that your district uses them. El Dorado, because sometimes they had fire alarms go off accidentally, have been outside in inclement weather, and they've used all these space blankets. So they'll reach back out to us and says, we need 110 blankets, and we turn around and look, when did you use 110 blankets? And they tell us, well, during this incident, the kids were outside, they were cold. They're reasonably cheap, so we're happy to send them back out to the school. So that, I can say El Dorado's the one that uses it the most, and we're happy to have them use it. We'll get them more.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board President Noble, Superintendent, members of the board. I had a question about the rave panic button. Who uses the rave panic button? And also, does it feed into alerting parents? I know, for example, when I've had a student like Cesar Chavez be in a lockdown, I get a notification. And I didn't know if that was because of the rave panic button or if there's another system that it feeds into. And also just who uses the rave panic button.
President Olmos, Superintendent Chavez, board member. So the rave panic button came to us as a result of me speaking to teachers and so forth when I first came on board. The biggest concern that I heard from them was we're getting placed into either shelter in place or lockdown, but we don't know why. So then the imagination of our kids just runs wild, and they hear a bang in the hallway. Next thing you know, they're saying, oh, those are gunshots. And they're sending that message back to their parents when that isn't the case. So it's adding more concern and worry for the parents, right? So we try to find a solution to this. So the rave panic button came to us as a system that, one, it's feasible because our first responders, the Emergency Communication Center, is a smart 911, so it interacts with it. Once we activate, per se, the red button, it will tell the REC, the Emergency Communication Center, the location of where the button was activated. It'll communicate simultaneously to the 911 dispatcher, and at the same time, for that family, what I call a family at the school who's opted into it, will get an immediate notification, a mass notification, saying, Mario just activated the active assailant button. The biggest response, if I see that on my phone, it comes in through a text, the app, or an email to the individual. My first response, if it's an active assailant, I go to the highest level of response. I go to lockdown in place. That's my first response because that's what happened. So we eliminate the lag, the time for us to create a message, a text message from the principal all the staff. We do that simultaneously while we're giving our geolocation, calling 911, and notifying all staff all at one time. So it does not go out to families. We opted not to send it out to families. That is where Mr. Narzik comes into play with another message that I create. My team will support me during the incident. I will then turn to notify the superintendent and other staff members that need to know, executive staff members, and then they'll start generating the communication out to families on the backside from what I'm giving to them what's happening.
Thank you so much. And go ahead, yeah.
On that, as you know, there were, I don't know how many lockdowns at Gonzales Community School this year for a variety of reasons. how do we manage the student panic? Are there best practices and training for staff there and that sort of thing? Just because, again, and I heard this from that community and experienced it myself, you're getting text messages, kids wondering if they should try and get out and run away. There's a lot of responses, and you're clearly aware of that, but are there sort of clear protocols for managing student panic and giving students some information as to what's going on? I believe there was a road rage incident at Gonzales that ended up pulling into the bus crescent there, and they locked down the school because somebody got out with a firearm or something like that. And there wasn't much information, I don't think, at that stage shared with the kids. And so, it was like, no, outside is not safe. Inside is way more safe. And, I just wonder how we manage that. I know in any given situation that's going to be different and complicated, and you don't necessarily want to share details about any number of things with the whole school community. But what do we do?
President Noble, that's a great question. And in that particular incident, Mr. Lopez had yet onboarded with the rave panic button, so he was not able to communicate the way I expressed the system's able to. I will tell you what I do and what my team does. For example, when Capitol High School had an incident of a domestic violence situation outside of the school, and the suspect went large, it was running, they suspected that he may be armed. What we do is we communicate frequently with law enforcement and say, hey, where are we at? What are we looking at? And whatever information they can give me, I kind of have an understanding what the staff should probably know. So I'll get back on this system and go to staff assist, which is another option, select the school and say, I just spoke to law enforcement. They have a K-9 out. They're searching for the individual. It is not affecting the school. It is simply a precautionary measure that we have gone into a shelter in place. I will keep you updated. They're telling me about another 15 to 20 minutes, and I'll let them know that way. That way, they have a better idea of what's happening. They don't panic. And another thing when it comes to students, we always encourage the students, number one, follow the adult. We expect the adult to know what to do. But there is a time that the student may know more because they're more interested in it. But for the most part, we're saying follow the adult. The adult's going to have this training beforehand of knowledge of what to do in certain situations, and their best to lead you to a safe location.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board President Noble, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez. Does every staff member have the rave panic button?
President Noble, Superintendent Chavez, board member, because all our staff members don't have a district phone, the way I put it out there is this is voluntary. You want to be included, please give us your phone number, we'll enter you into the system, and then you can activate the rave panic button. What I found when we first deployed it, there were a handful of teachers that didn't want it, but the first drill they went into a lockdown, and then they came out. Other teachers were talking about that was easy, or I knew what was happening, and that one teacher in the group was like, I had no idea what was going on. So they said, how did you know? They talk about it, and then we'll get these emails from that particular teacher and says, can you add me to the rave panic button? Knowledge is power, right? It's always best to know, and they know that when they come out of it not having been known anything, that it's better next time around. I want to be in the know-how. I want to know what's happening next.
So my question on the rave panic button is similar to these lines, is about its usage, which staff, what schools, is it mandatory for principals? Do they have district phones? Just like, it seems like such an easy and accessible tool to have that I'm wondering how widespread it is.
Certainly. Board President, Superintendent Chavez, board member, as I said, we started off with Santa Fe High, Capital, and Eco. We added transportation in there because of the buses maybe coming during drop-off, pickup, et cetera. We moved on to middle schools, so Ms. Cording adopted it at Milagro. Ortiz was onboarding it. And then we also pushed it towards the K-8 because of their middle schools. Because of the principals having so many things to do coming off of COVID or coming back from the remote learning, we weren't mandating them to adopt it 100% because I knew they had so many things to do. I didn't want them to hate me and say you're just being too forceful. But this upcoming year, I think it's time. I really think it's time that we, one, provide them the support and facilitate that onboarding for these schools. I've had two elementary schools, only two, ask for it. They weren't able to onboard on time either. That was EJ and Nava. But since it's free to any of our schools, if any of them wants it and the principal's committed to get on board, we'll help them get on board.
And Secretary Bose, this goes back to that Leadership Institute and trying to educate our principals and secretaries about these tools.
Thank you.
And just a comment, I would say if there's anything, and I know there's a lot to do, and I hope this year is time for us to do all these things, but if there's some training, best practices for staff on how to talk to kids in a lockdown, I think it might go a long way, even if it's as simple as don't panic, there's a good team working on this, because of course people have a huge variety of reactions, and some of those touchstones of just what to say, even if it's don't panic, panic never helps. Because again, having seen it and lived through and talked to a number of parents in the community, it was pretty clear that lots of staff members were very scared, and of course the kids pick up on that, and some basic things on what to say to kids, even if it's not sharing rich information, but just to help them sort of calm down, we got this, might be very helpful for the situations that clearly we do have to manage.
And President Noble, if I may add one thing before, I don't think you've asked, the way we condition our staff to understand how to use RAVE, we use it during our drills. The staff assist has an option to select, Mr. Higley knows about this, to select a message a pre-message that goes out to all the staff that's on board. It says the upcoming message is a drill, and then the drill follows, and then if it's a fire evacuation, then as a message to you may enter back to the school, and a final message that says all drills have concluded. Any other alert, consider it an actual alert. So that way we condition the staff to understand how the system is working for us.
Thank you. Keep going.
Thank you, Board President Noble. I noticed that Secretary Bose has a question written on this slide, and I've gotten to go first on every slide, so I will yield the floor.
What if we have the same question, though?
Great. Then I hope you ask it first.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent. This is the similar kind of question that I asked about RAVELIC. I'm just curious how this is utilized in the real world versus just this theoretical presentation. Where are these kits? Who has the app? Do they have to have the app if they have the kit? Just want to make sure that people have the tools that they need when they actually have to use the supplies.
President Noble, Superintendent Chavez, board member, that's a great question. And next time you visit your school, find it. It's an obvious location. It's going to have a little barcode. Scan the barcode, and then it's going to tell you all you need is a valid email address. Enter your email address for the school, and then look at our password. It'll be on there, which I'm happy to share with anybody. It says enter code Santa Fe PS. That's our code. You activate the app right then and there. You're free to use it. Anybody can use it. Staff members, students, visitors, parents, whoever wants to download the app. When we spoke to this company, they said if you run out of licenses, for lack of a better term, for this app, let us know. We'll give you another $2,000 on top of what we already gave you. Now, in an emergency, I never downloaded the app. I forgot to do it. I didn't know about it. Somebody just handed me this, or I don't speak English. We have a pamphlet in here that also walks you through it in Spanish and English that you can pull it out. And this is for severe bleeding and it'll walk you through on how to use a lot of these items that are in here. So it does have a couple of ways to work its way through.
Thank you. That was my primary concern, being a nurse. Downloading an app in an emergency situation is not ideal if someone is bleeding out. So I'm glad there's an alternative. Thank you.
Thank you, Board President Noble, members of the board, Superintendent. Is there a possibility, I don't know how cost prohibitive it is, but to have, or maybe this is already happening, but to have these in multiple locations in the school so that, if someone has to, for example, Santa Fe High and Capitol High are very large buildings, and if someone had a massive amount of blood loss, getting them to the place where the kit is it possible to have them more accessible?
President Noble, Superintendent Chavez, board member, absolutely. All it is it's a cost. I thank Director O'Brien for the initial deployment of this. She found the funding when I first came on board through, I believe, Medicaid. So it was approximately $36,000 that I believe she spent to get us started on this program. We can work with Business Services, Mr. Martinez, with the blessing of Superintendent Chavez. If you'd like us to expand it to more locations, we're happy to do that. On top of that, and I hope I'm not mistaken to say this, but we also would love AEDs. There are certain locations that have AEDs. Santa Fe High School has 2 of them. Capitol has 2 of them. They also have, each school has a portable one. We think that we want this material to go to waste, to be honest with you. Hang in the wall for 10, 20 years. I don't care how long it lasts. Never used, but that one day it's needed, it's available. And we can honestly walk away saving a person's life. That's going to make us all very proud and happy that we prepared for that.
Thank you, Board President Noble, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez. For the RhinoWare, you mentioned that it was difficult, for someone with a sledgehammer to get into like one particular point. Does it help protect against gunfire? If someone were to try to get into the door that way?
Board President, Superintendent Chavez, board member, absolutely. I mean, it's like any other device. It can be defeated if it's struck correctly, but if you ever go to the school, take a look at it. Every door that has a black plate on the exterior has a RhinoWare at the interior. It's very thin. Its strength comes that you're trying to separate it at its strongest point. So for you to be able to hit just right to dismantle it, you'd have to be very lucky or extremely knowledgeable on how the device looks and what's going to be inside, how it's going to be set up in the inside. So I would honestly bet on that it'd be a lot easier for them to dismantle hinges first before they actually were able to dismantle this.
And Mr. Salbutris, if I can add, from the interior, you can unlock it. From the exterior, you cannot unless you have a specialized tool.
And Superintendent Chavez, if I may add on that, that specialized tool is not made public for obvious reasons. It is a tactical approach of our response, but our partners in law enforcement have access to those tools. Upon they arrive to the school, they were provided that. So if they needed to make entry into these rooms, they have a way to get in.
Thank you. My next question is on page 21. I don't know if anyone has any questions before that. Okay, thank you so much. I have 2 questions on this slide. Is there anything in the continuous search for improvements that you've identified that there is a financial or logistical obstacle to, something you'd like to implement but you don't have the funding, or there's a reason that you can't implement it? Have you found anything there?
Board President Noble, Superintendent Chavez, board member, that's a great question, because I think I know, I have an idea where the community is going with this in general, because I listen as well. And a lot of the community members are talking about metal detectors. And they've expanded beyond metal detectors. Now they're weapon detectors, basically, right? Which look very different. We may be going through them regularly, not even knowing. Our obstacle is cost, 1. 2 is staffing. The typical metal detector, it takes approximately 5 staff members to get about 800 students through it in 1 hour. The newer models takes approximately 2 staff members to get the same number through the same detector, or the newer type of detector. The problem that myself and my staff have is that it is best practices around the nation, and FBI supports this, is if you're going to have a metal detector or a weapons detector at a particular site, you should have somebody who can respond to this equal threat. And what I mean by that, I don't feel comfortable asking the principal or the counselor, a teacher, or anyone else who's not capable of responding to a person with a gun to be standing there and try to disarm somebody. That's just not good practice. So that is the biggest problem or obstacle we have, is that we don't have that correct staff member at that site to be standing there in case that particular person comes through with a gun with bad intentions.
Thank you so much. I will say on that, I have heard that from constituents, and I have read evidence of the psychological impacts of metal detectors on students as well. So in my head, when we talk about that, that's one of the things that sort of pops up for me as well. And then about the intercom systems, you mentioned there at Asequia Madre and Wood Gormley, are there other schools that they exist at, and is it difficult to do something? You mentioned that it's difficult at Santa Fe High and Capitol to have them. I wondered if you could explain more about why.
Absolutely. Board President Noble, Superintendent Chavez, board member. So right now, we do have a Sequia Madre, we do have Wood Garmley. We are going to install at Tesuque because they have an old intercom system there. We've actually expanded our discussions with Mr. Romero about improving the overall single point of entry at Tesuque because of where it's at. Most schools are pretty straightforward. We could install them, they would work fine. The difficulty with our high schools, we start off with Santa Fe High School. It's a gorgeous school. Me and President Noble graduated from there, so we're demons all the way, of course. Oh, Ms. Bose as well. It's a college campus. There's multiple points of entry. We're working on it. Facilities is working hard to get us to that right point of entry. It's going to take some time. That's where that difficulty comes. If we install it right at the main new gorgeous building that they built, well, that's just one building. But there's other entrances to that school. So that's where the difficulty comes. Do we move forward installing it there? I think it's not a Mario decision. I think it's a collaborative decision that we sit down. Is that the most prudent decision at this time? Or do we have other mechanisms that we can implement there at that time? Capitol High School, similar scenario, not as much as a college campus, but we do have many doors leading from the visitors parking lot that you can go into the gym. You can go into the performance, you can go into this wing, or you can make your way all the way to the front office. Which one are you going to select once we screen you at the guard shack, right? So those are the two components that I'm looking at. That's always been the most difficult portion of my job when I came on board, is those two schools. And I have to work with my team to be innovative and start thinking outside the box how we can make it better.
And Board Member Anderson, I've asked Mr. Salbidras to come back with some quotes for those cameras. That way we can have a single point of entry, have that exterior door locked. They would ring that button, and then the secretary would be able to monitor who is out there.
Thank you, Board President Noble. My next question is on slide 23. And it's really, it's not on the slide 23, it's sort of a general few questions. If anyone doesn't have a question before then.
Please go.
Thank you. It seems like we are putting, this might be a comment, but it seems like we're putting a lot of responsibility and maybe even danger around folks who are in the front office, around secretaries. It seems like they have a big, big responsibility being in front of that single point of entry. And I wondered if they receive special training or even if they receive social emotional support being in what I would consider to be a relatively dangerous position. If there were to be an active shooter, that would be the first person they would encounter unless they have the intercom system with no protection. So I just wonder what kind of support we're offering to school secretaries. Board President, Superintendent Chavez, board member. The emotional support component, I hate to put her on her spot, would be Ms. O'Brien. She'd be best to answer that. That's not my expertise. What I can speak to is the partners behind us help us with active shooter training, which means they put on a presentation to our staff. It's open to anybody who wants to attend, where they will go through the processes they take and what our staff should be doing in an active shooter response. What we did this year, thanks to the police department, we were able to record it. Those who were not able to attend, it was still made available to them to review it at a later date. And if they had questions, they can go to their principal. If the principal didn't know the answer, we're always available to them, and I'm sure our partners in law enforcement would also be available to answer any questions. And I don't know if they want to elaborate on the active shooter. I know it's been standing for a while.
Just to add to that, Madam President, Mr. Secretary, and board member, a lot of the videos are also available publicly. If you go to the Department of Justice website or Homeland Security, they also have a number of videos that are related to active shooter and threat recognition.
On that point, I sort of wonder, maybe it's a back-to-school communications request, but if we could, put together some resources and information for our school community when we re-enter or are looking for that, because people are hungry for information, and I think knowledge is power, and it will help to know that there's resources, even if you're probably going to be like me, a lot of people who just move past the email, but then if something happens, like a upsetting prank phone call, to pull that email back up and be able to say, oh, okay, here's some links or what have you. Anyway, I think it might be something that would really benefit our school community if we could share some information.
I think that's a great idea, and we can add that to our bulletin, our news bulletin that we send out to the community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Board President Noble, Superintendent, members of the board, I just have one additional comment, and I think this is to the board. And I think that you might agree with me, knowing both of you outside of the board. We've not had this discussion as a board, but our security department and our partners do such incredible work keeping our schools safe. And I think there is, in terms of active shooters, a big elephant in the room, which are our gun laws. And I think that as a body, we advocate for funding for our schools. We advocate for a number of things with our Santa Fe delegation. And I wonder if there's an opportunity for the board to take a position on common sense gun reform. We have an incredibly supportive, sheriff, who is one of the only sheriffs who said they will, support the extreme risk protection order. One of the only sheriffs in the state who will support that, and which is a program that's frankly not utilized enough. And I know that we have a supportive Santa Fe delegation who know how we can advocate for that. We have incredible nonprofit partners like the New Mexico Coalition to End Gun Violence. And I just wonder if that's something that we can explore as a board to really take a position on eliminating this threat to our schools.
So you created the segue I was going to do, which is to invite the co-president of New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence, Miranda Viscoli, to make some comments on this, because in thinking about this, I am so grateful for the partnership with our law enforcement agencies, for the relationships and incredible work of Mr. Salbridges and his team. And it is gut-wrenching that we keep having to have these conversations, and that so much of this continues to come to schools, and it has to be all the things. We have to do this. We have to work on the comprehensive plans, and again, just can't say enough about the work you all are doing, and the gratitude that I have for everything that you're looking for. But as I was thinking about this, it just seemed like we can't have this conversation without turning to what else can we do? I mean, even this rhetoric about that is just so distressing about, hardening targets and whatever else we've heard, and the ideas that we might make schools, with razor wire and even metal detectors or armed, places that are so defensible that so that for what? So in thinking about the work we can do as a board, and whether it's further prevention work, I really appreciate the Office of Student Wellness being here, because, as Secretary Bose said, the prevention of bullying, really getting at it early seems incredibly important. And so, I thought we might talk a little bit more about prevention and advocacy, and thoughts on what we can do and what schools can do to really prevent gun violence. So, Ms. Viscoli, please, if you would come up and share some thoughts with us.
Madam
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Madam President, Superintendent Chavez, and members of the committee. Thank you for having me, and I'll make it brief because I know it's getting late. The good news is there's a lot we can do, right? So this amazing team has been working so hard on the protection of our youth, and that's imperative. But gun violence is a multifaceted problem that needs a multi-pronged approach, right? And so with our youth, it's one, protection, like everything these amazing men in this group has been talking about, but then there's also prevention. And then there's also how do we scaffold our youth. So President Noble, you had talked a lot about panic and what these youth go through. So New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence, the majority work we do is actually with our youth, and we have had the honor to partner with the Office of Wellness since 2014 or 15, and on gun violence prevention programs that are youth-driven, that give our youth an opportunity to speak, that create space where they can talk about a situation that affects their safety and their well-being. One of the programs that we do is the Student Pledge Against Gun Violence, and we have done that in every single, up until COVID, but we're excited to work with the Office of Wellness again. We're already in conversation, so we're ready to go right at the beginning of the year. But what this program does, and it's a national program, is that it gives our young people, again, that space to create an event or a program that is youth-driven, and then also gives every student an opportunity to sign the Student Pledge Against Gun Violence. And the first thing we do, though, when we go into schools, we say, this isn't about not going hunting. This isn't about not going to the shooting range with your family. This isn't about being anti-gun, but this is about gun violence prevention. And what we saw in the many years that we did this at our Santa Fe Public Schools, and we also did it in northern New Mexico at Espanola Valley High School, Pojoaque, Mesa Verde, was that the Youth Resilience Survey showed a 54% reduction of students bringing weapons to schools during the time that we did this program. Now, we can't say that's because of us, because we can't prove that. But we actually take that win because nobody's in the schools talking to them, all year long about gun violence prevention. So what I love about this program is how it creates that space. We were doing a project once at Capitol High School, and the school's on lockdown because there was a gun on campus. And so I waited with all the parents for 3 hours, and then we actually went in and did the project. And those students stayed for 5 hours. And we brought pizza, and it gave them an outlet. It gave them an opportunity to talk about a situation that concerns their safety and their well-being beyond lockdowns, beyond everything else. So we will continue to do this here and throughout New Mexico, the Student Pledge. But what we've also seen working in other schools we were at South Valley Academy in Albuquerque last year every Thursday, and the students, it's an anecdotal story, but I think it's important. I'll make it quick. What I noticed is every Thursday afternoon, more and more students were showing up, and more students were showing up. I was getting a lot of pizza. I was like, what's going on here? And I realized, again, they have no outlet to talk about gun violence prevention. And one young man, he was a senior, he said, legit, miss, I hate art. And I know this is art-based, but I just love being here because I've lost so many people to gun violence, and I'm 18, and I want to make it to 19. And that's why he was there. And then another youth did something brilliant. He created a survey to put on Instagram because what they were noticing was the middle school kids and the freshman kids were going to parties with a lot of guns. And so they created this survey to get an idea of what does a kid do when they go to a party with a gun? Do they know to leave? Do they tell somebody? And this survey woke up the community that there's a real problem of kids going to school, going to parties with guns. And so I would love to see, and this was all youth-driven, right? It was the youth, this one student created this on a SurveyMonkey. So there's a lot of things that our youth can do when it comes to prevention. So we're happy again to partner with the Office of Wellness and can't wait to see what the amazing students in Santa Fe do. But in terms of legislation, and I'll talk briefly about this, it would be great if school boards could get behind common sense gun violence prevention legislation. What we're looking at next year is, one, a child access prevention bill. This is, where do most kids who want to, what do you say, commit a school shooting? What's the word? Where do they get their guns? From their parents. So if we can pass a child access prevention law, that really does go a long way, but it also, what I like about child access prevention laws is that It's also a teaching law. Because if you combine that with PSAs and getting parents to lock up their guns and really think about that, it does make a difference. There's also what we're working on is raising the age. So right now, an 18-year-old can buy a rifle when they turn 18. They have to be 21 to buy a semi-automatic handgun. But included in the definition of a rifle is an AR-15. Including in the definition of a rifle is a semi-automatic rifle with a large magazine clip. So we're going to work very hard in this next legislative session to at least raise that to age 21, as well as an assault weapons ban. I don't think that will happen in my lifetime, and I'm relatively young in New Mexico. I would love to see it, but it won't happen. And then last, what we would love to see get passed is an Office of Gun Violence Prevention, because we have to get on the prevention side of this. We can't keep incarcerating our way out of it. If we could incarcerate our way out of it, we'd be the safest country in the nation, but we're not. We're sitting here at a school board figuring out how the quickest path is to get a tourniquet on a kid, right, who gets shot. So if we can get on the prevention side, we put in every year $20 million into DWI, and hey, that's working. DWI vehicular homicide is going down, but 3 times as many people are shot and killed in New Mexico that are killed in DWI, and we put hardly any money in. So those are the legislative priorities that we're looking at. What I'd also like to see in Santa Fe, last year we got $9 million for violence intervention programs. Right now, most of that is going to Albuquerque. There are a group, there's about 65 young folks in this city that are going down a path of gangs and drugs. And the violence intervention program is a great way to get them an honorable exit, to get them the system and the help that they need. Oftentimes, these kids have a knapsack full of aces, and that's one of the reasons why they go down that path. So how do we help them before they go down that path? Having talked to youth who have shot and killed people, they all say, I wish I didn't pull that trigger. So how do we do that? And we have all this money sitting there. So I think we need to work with the city and law enforcement and school boards to see if we can start accessing some of those funds and create a violence intervention program here, which includes restorative justice, right? It includes conflict resolution and all those amazing prevention points that we can do. So that is everything, I think. If anybody has any questions. Oh, I have one last thing. In addition to the violence intervention program, we have the extremist protection order can actually be used by parents, by school boards, by school admin, anybody who wants to use it. And so New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence has a foundation grant, and we offer free trainings. So if that's something schools would like to see, if a young person is making a threat of bringing a gun to school, you can actually apply with those parents for an extremist protection order, so those parents can't have a firearm until things are figured out as to what is going on. So that's also another tool in our toolbox to address this multifaceted problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. Any questions for Ms. Fiscal?
Excuse me, Board President Noble, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez, the comment about the tourniquets really hit me. It's ridiculous that we're in this position. I just wanted to say the last piece about the ERPO being used by anyone. I would love to see, I would go to a training like that in a second. I would love to see folks in SFPS able to access that and know how to use it. I feel like it's an incredibly powerful law, and to know how to access that would be really wonderful, I think, for the district.
Okay. Any final thoughts, Mr. Salpedres?
President Noble, one final thing. I just don't want anybody to take away that I love Ezequiel Madre Woodcormley above any other school. The reason they have the AI phone, they don't have a vestibule. So we had to come up with a different solution to screen visitors before they walked into the school. So just to make that clear.
Thank you. Good footnote. Appreciate it.
Madam President?
Yes, Secretary Bozet, go ahead.
Thank you. I just had some closing thoughts, and I wanted to echo what Board Member Anderson said, that, you know, I've engaged in a lot of conversations in the last 3 weeks of people expressing concern about schools. And at every opportunity, I've said, this is not a responsibility that can rest solely on our shoulders. There is a gun problem, and we can have every wonderful preventative system in place that we possibly can, and it will not be enough to stop someone who has a weapon of war and intends to do harm. And so I think, I appreciate all of this. I have the utmost confidence in these systems, and I really, really, really hope that we can do something to address some sensible gun laws in our country, because it's unfair to ask our students and our teachers to live like this and to die like this. It's just not fair. And I really would like to thank our community partners for coming tonight. I was very moved by your willingness to face this really unfortunate threat with us. Thank you.
I think that's perfect. Thank you all very much. We really appreciate you being here, the partnership, the ongoing conversation, communication, and community commitment to keep our kids safe, and staff members and everybody in the Santa Fe Public Schools. And really, this is a root system, so it's all connected, as I know you all know. And this work that we do together is so important, and we hope we never need to rely on all these protocols. But thank you for so much of the time. Thank you for everybody who has listened and tuned in, and for the work that you continue to do. We really, really appreciate it. The partnership of our law enforcement agency, of our nonprofits, our Office for Student Wellness, and certainly, Mr. Salvetris, it feels really great to have you and your team and the depth of expertise that we have with the folks in the Santa Fe Public Schools, and the relationships, as I mentioned earlier, and the partnerships. So thank you. And thank you, Board Member Anderson, for taking the lead on moving us through the presentation and the questions.
Thank you, Board President Noble, for letting me.
I love it. It's great to, sit back sometimes. Okay. I guess we'll go ahead and move on. I'm guessing Secretary Bozé is pretty well briefed on the reallocation of the 2017 and 2021 general obligation bond funds. Thanks again. Thank you all. This is item A on our Roman numeral 9, our action items. Superintendent.
Thank you, Board President Noble, members of the board. Taking us through a brief overview of the reallocation of the 2017-2021 GEO funds is our Executive Director of Operations, Mr. Gabe Romero, and also a CRC member, Mr. Dax Contreras.
Good evening, Board. President Noble, board members. This evening, I'll try and make it brief. We're very excited to be here this evening to talk about the ECO project and moving forward with it, and I think we found a pathway forward to do that. But I would like to explain to you what our method is in moving forward with the ECO project that could get moving very quickly if we're successful this evening. So just an excellent view of the illustration of what the potential is for the building, for the ECO building. That's currently sitting there, that's been demoed out and is just waiting for construction to continue on it, except that we have to make sure that we have the funding in place to be able to do that. You may recall from our updates that earlier in the year we went through this construction manager at risk process in order to secure contractors to be able to move forward with some of these projects. Because of the pricing escalation that was going on, we needed help and someone we could work with to make sure that we're able to bring these projects in at a reasonable price that the GO bond allocations could support to do that. So Franken Construction was selected for this particular project at ECO, and we've worked closely with them to move the project forward. If you recall, I think we have a illustration next of what the project is. And you see that big blue area is the existing old Votech building. That's been completely gutted, and like I said, it's just waiting, ready to go to be renovated. Down to the bottom left, you see a kind of an orange or a reddish area, and that would be the new administrative offices that they're lacking pretty badly right now. They're working out of a mobile unit, and they're very patient, but I know they really would like to have real admin offices. And then to the far right, you'll see that yellow area, and that's their multi-use gym that would serve as their new cafeteria and also for their physical education requirements as a gym and other types of activities that they do there on the campus. So this has long since been a need for the campus, and we'd like to really be able to realize that, and I'll talk to you about what the path forward is. You'll see that with the combination of the two GO bond, general obligation bond allocations for ECO, we have a total of $16.18 million for the project. Unfortunately, Franken's original price came in, and this is because of price escalation. We've seen 25% plus increase in construction processes since last year at this time. That's just 1 year, and this project has been going on for some time. So they came in quite a bit above what our total project had. Remember that total project needs other costs in it too, and we'll talk about soft costs in a minute. But what we did do is we worked with them between the time we got their pricing, probably in March, and April, May, June, to get those costs down and do some value engineering that didn't affect the scope or the programming of the project, because we were very careful, we didn't want to affect that, but would bring in the project still at a better price. So that brought it down to $17.45 million. Did we get a good cost? Did we get a good deal from Franken? You know, we want to be sure about that. We did review who they sent out their bids to for their subcontractors. We looked those over, but we wanted to make sure that they had access to contractors that could bring in some of this work at a good price. So what we did, we have two other large contractors that work for the district, Bradbury Stan and Janes Corporations, which were very helpful and willing to share their pricing with us. You'll see on there for remodeling costs, what their pricing looks like. For new construction costs by square foot is what it is. And then also their site work and utility costs that come along with that. We did an analysis of that, and if you look at the pricing, it's very similar to what Franken came in to us initially. And they're large companies, and they're very dependable, and their pricing is very consistent. So I think we did get a decent cost from Franken, and they worked with us to value engineer a little bit out of that so we could bring it in at a lower price. I'm sorry I missed that slide for the public, but moving on to slide number 7, this is how we see the project. The total allocation was 16.1, and the guaranteed maximum price that Franken is willing to move forward with this evening in a contract that is in consent is $17.453 million. But that's just the construction cost to build the building. We still need additional fees for redesign on some of that because we value engineered out a few things and changed a couple things. Furniture, kitchen equipment, cafeteria seating, all that are the soft costs that we need in addition to just the building itself to make it a fully functional building, which comes in at about $3.2 million. You can see that on the middle line. So if you total that up, the total project costs come up to $2.6 million, which is very, very consistent with what we're seeing on the market right now. That's not unusual. Unfortunately, over the last 2 years, we just saw this huge escalation because of supply chain issues, because of lack of being able to find labor, and a lot of other issues in construction that are making things very expensive. So it's very consistent, but it does bring the total project in about $4.5 million over the cost that we have allocated for it. Luckily, we have some methods that we talked with the CRC on how we could bring that project forward, and I'd like to introduce or have Mr. Dax Contreras continue with this presentation and talk about what we discussed during our CRC meeting and about a path forward. So, thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Contreras.
Thank you. Good evening. So the CRC voted unanimously to go ahead and support this reallocation of funds. If you look at some of the numbers, it clears out the 2017 contingency funding and a big chunk of the 2021 contingency funding. But honestly, with increasing costs, there's really no way to move forward without starting to look at canceling other projects. So it's the best option out of not a lot of good options. So I think this is the best step forward, and the CRC also, that's why we voted in unanimous form to support this, because otherwise the next step would be to start having to cancel projects, and unfortunately that's just the world we live in right now. I think that's, yeah. Oh, this is the breakdown of funding. So the reallocation is taking money from this 2017 Business Center Fire System, and then the contingency funding from 2017 and 2021. The 2021 contingency, like I said, that's most of it, of the contingency allowance, and the 2017 contingency, that's all of it. So there's no contingency left for the 2017 GO bond. Total allocation is the deficit that Gabe talked about just a moment ago. I think that's it.
Thank you very much. What is our projected maximum enrollment at ECO?
President Noble, members of the board, we're currently just over 100 with the waiting list. So we're hoping to increase. Do you have the number, Mr. Romero?
Board President Noble, board members, and Superintendent, I believe that number is at least 300, a little over 300. So it's quite a bit more than what's currently enrolled, and we're hoping that the program can attract students and move forward with the proper facilities.
Right, and more robust curriculum and more offerings.
And I'm guessing the nature of the school, I'm not guessing, but is needing equipment and space in unique and innovative ways.
Absolutely, and it's one of the few schools left in the state that really focuses in on welding, agriculture, things like that. So it's very unique. It's a great opportunity for students to take advantage of. And, you know, if we're able to build it out, then we're able to promote it and really increase enrollment.
Thank you.
Madam
Secretary
President?
Rosé.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to make a motion to reallocate the 2017 and 2021 general obligation funds for the ECO project as proposed.
Thank you very much.
Madam President, could I ask one question before we?
Yeah, I'll go
Okay.
ahead in second.
Okay.
And please, go ahead,
Okay,
Board Member
thank you.
Anderson.
I just had a question about the contingency fund and particularly about raising construction prices. So with the other GO bond projects, will we find ourselves with rising construction prices there, and will clearing out the contingency fund impact any future projects?
Board Member Anderson, President Noble, and Superintendent, that is the reality that we'll be facing as we move forward. So we'll have to probably make some tougher decisions than this as we move forward to keep up with the pricing that we have from our facility master plan and was done in 2020. So yes, we'll have to contend with that.
Thank you so much. Madam President.
Go ahead.
Thank you. But I do think it's important to follow up on that question, that several of the big projects, or at least one of the other big projects, is already locked in with the CMAR process, correct? So those bigger projects won't face the same kind of
impact as far as funding?
Board Member Bozay, President Noble, Superintendent, not Board Member. We will have challenges with all of them. We have one that's already underway and has been priced with a guaranteed maximum price at Santa Fe High School at the Commons. We're trying to do the same thing with ECO this evening and lock in that guaranteed maximum price so we can move forward with construction on that relatively soon. We still have the third project that won't be funded until March of 2023, and I think we will have to face some challenges with that because the pricing is a couple years old.
Anything further? Okay, we have a motion to approve the reallocation of 2017 and 2021 general obligation funds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you very much, Mr. Romero and Mr. Contreras. Thank you for your service and for being here. And spoiler alert, I'm guessing you know this, but on behalf of Dr. Gonzalez, I'm going to be renominating you to the CRC tonight. So again, thank you for your service in the past and in the future.
Thank you. And thank you, Board.
Thank you. Okay, on to the consent agenda. Any questions, comments? As Mr. Romero mentioned, we do have this contract with Franken Construction on our consent agenda tonight. Are there any questions on the consent agenda or anything anybody wants to consider separately?
Madam President, I do have a question under the contracts over 60,000.
Go ahead.
On page 1, fourth up from the bottom, for Solient Health, there are two other numbers there that are in the, $100,000 range, but the provide speech language pathologist to be eligible students in SFPS for next school year at $512,000. It was singular pathologist, and so that maybe is what caught me up there. That seems like an awfully high salary for one person.
It is not. Multiple.
Okay. Thank you.
On this line of questioning, there's a lot of incredibly important services on these contracts on the consent agenda. Is this a trend? Are we having to contract out more for these services because we can't hire folks in-house as much?
Board President Noble, members of the board, this is a past practice that we do as we end the school year or fiscal year to open up POs just in case we can't fill these positions. These are all hard to fill positions. If you look at the list, nurses, speech and language pathologists, visually impaired teachers, special ed teachers, OT and PT. So as we were talking, even with Senator Worth today, not only about educators and having difficulty finding them, we were talking about nursing and other individuals that really help the wheels of the district turn, right? And we provide these services. So we open up these POs so we can provide services to start school, but our ultimate goal is to hire them. I've also had some meetings with New Mexico Highlands University to figure out ways we can create a more robust system of funneling hard-to-fill positions in. In part of negotiations that were finally finalized, one of the things that we did agree to was providing a stipend for the mechanics as a sign-on bonus for $1,000 because we have one mechanic. We have 8 vacancies, is that correct, Mr. Romero? 8 positions, mechanics. I don't want to get the number wrong, but I know we have 1. Oh, 2.
Board members and 2, and then 2 mechanic helpers.
Yep. So it's, again, another need, so that's what this is for.
Thank you for that context. Appreciate that.
And then just one last question, Madam President. On the second page, there are 2 different companies that have contracts to provide school-based nursing. Is that correct?
That is correct. There could be a third. Usually it's Stepping Stones, CES, Soliant, and I may have been missing one other, but Maximum Health, is that another one?
Okay.
But yeah, it is.
Multiple companies that we contract with.
And it helps us fill those vacancies. If we just go to one vendor, they may not have the staff to provide to us.
Okay, thank you, that makes sense.
I'll go ahead and move approval of the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Thank you, Board Member Anderson. Any further discussion? We have a motion and a second on approval of the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have approved the consent agenda. Thank you. Moving on to action item C, Resolution 2022-2023-1, Open Meetings Act. Superintendent.
Thank you, Board President Noble, members of the board. Taking us through the next two will be our legal counsel, Mr. Josh Granata.
Good evening, President Noble, board members, Superintendent Chavez. Before you tonight is the first resolution for this new, I guess, part of the fiscal year. Where I don't know, it's just the first resolution is what it is. It's the Open Meetings Act resolution, and the two, well, actually, the only real significant change is the change to the dates of the meeting. The resolution indicates that the board meetings will be held on the second and fourth Thursday of every month, and essentially that's the only change that we've really made to this resolution. There have been no changes to the Open Meetings Act, and so we'll ask for your approval tonight, and I'll stand for any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Mr. Granata. And just to say, part of the reason we need to do this is the Board of Education meeting calendar, which is our next action item, which changes things to, what do we say, second and fourth? The second and fourth Thursdays. This is in part because I have a standing conflict on third Thursdays. We, at some point a while ago, moved board meetings to Thursdays from Tuesdays due to Vice President Garcia's conflicts on the county commission. In discussions with the superintendent, correct me if I mischaracterize anything, but we've discussed that really the most important thing for the cadence of board meetings is how the district staff can be most efficient. Honestly, board members come and go, but we need a cadence of meetings that on Tuesdays don't kill the week for the district staff. And the second and fourth meetings, I believe the superintendent and team thought were actually a better cadence for them because that first Thursday of the month is sometimes challenging, and it is very helpful for me in the next year in removing that conflict on the third Thursdays. Would you like to add anything?
You are correct. In discussion with our team, we did think if we moved it back to a Tuesday, if it was the first and third Tuesday of the month, it could potentially wipe out the staff for the week because, as you guys know, when we have long, dense board meetings, Friday, you have brain fog, and it's not from COVID, it's from the board meeting.
Madam President, I move to approve the resolution regarding the Open Meetings Act to change our meetings to the second and fourth Thursdays of the month.
I'll second.
Thank you, Secretary Bozé with the motion, Board Member Anderson with the second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Moving on to the related item, the 2022-2023 Board of Education meeting calendar. And as everyone knows, we can see here in our materials the tentative executive session, the tentative study sessions, and finance subcommittees, and all of that. So, of course, we do make adjustments as needed through the year, but this will be what we look at for the 2022-2023 school year. Anything to add, Superintendent?
Just to make note, again, it's tentative. As you know, we started tonight's exec session at 5, so, it says 4:30 here, but again, that could be adjusted, with proper notification.
I'd like to move approval. Is that too early?
No, no, I'll second.
Okay, great.
All right, we'll give Secretary Bozeri the second, Board Member Anderson with the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the Board of Education 2022-2023 meeting schedule, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Now, an incredibly important item, the 2022-2023 NEA Santa Fe Collective Bargaining Agreement. Item E on our action items under Roman numeral 9. Superintendent.
Thank you, Board President Noble, members of the board. Taking us through a brief summary is both Vivian Roybal, part of the negotiating team for NEA Santa Fe, and also our lead our lead negotiator with NEA Santa Fe, Deputy Superintendent Romero.
Thank you, President Noble.
Good evening.
President Noble, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez, the district finalized negotiations with NEA Santa Fe. I especially want to thank Vivian Roybal and, of course, our president, Grace Mayer, along with Jamie Torres, who's a special education teacher who's participated in negotiations, and, of course, district leadership, and that includes Mr. Hagley, Carl Morano, Ms. Casaus, along with Robert Martinez and other district staff that came in and supported negotiations. Before I move forward and share some of the highlights, we have Vivian, who has a few words.
I just want to thank you guys for helping us ratify and vote for this, and we're hoping that you will accept it tonight.
Thank you, and thanks for being here and staying through all
The long evening.
all the stuff.
I'm here if you want me to go over big highlights around negotiations. Sure. Some of the big highlights are, of course, that the teachers' work hours has moved from 7 hours to 6 hours and 45 minutes a day. All employees in the district will be receiving a 7% minimum increase in their salary. We negotiated the pay tables for the new teacher levels of 1, 2, and 3 to 50, 60, and 70. Another big highlight is we have increased planning time and collaborative time in our secondary schedule, so that's very exciting for more time for collaboration. And I do want to stress that it's not interfering with state statute and regulations around instructional minutes. Another big highlight is we have created a tiered system for cafeteria leads with their base pay starting at $20 an hour at Tier 1, $21 at Tier 2, and $23 at Tier 3. We also have bus drivers' base pay starting at $19 an hour, mechanics starting at $20 an hour. Our safety aides, their base pay starts at $18.40, and our leads with the base of $19.75. We also want to celebrate our educational assistants. They start at $15, but each year there's an increase of 25 cents. And we also negotiated a longevity stipend for those EAs that have worked 20 years plus for $1,000. So that was negotiated. Our educational behavioral health assistants start at $16.50, but moving to step 1, they will be raised salary to $17.67. And I do want to stress that with the board support, we will be picking up, or the district will be picking up the pay increase to employee health insurance. Those are some of the big highlights.
Which comes out to another 0.5% on whatever raise they're going to receive.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Ms. Roybal, do you want to add anything? All right. Secretary Bozay, yeah.
Madam President, I move to approve the NEA Santa Fe and Santa Fe Public Schools Collective Bargaining Agreement for 2022-2023.
I'll second.
Thank you, Secretary Bozay with the motion, Board Member Anderson with the second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you both so much, and please share our thanks to everyone on the negotiating teams, both for NEA Santa Fe and for the district. I know this is a lot of hard work, and we're really pleased that there is a good agreement that we can approve, and of course, the NEA board has already ratified this, and so now we move forward, and thank you. Okay. Item F, our board member committee representatives. I don't know if there's any urgency around appointing anyone to the New Mexico School Boards Association. And I would imagine we can make a change if we need to, but I'm sort of inclined, Dr. Gonzalez expressed interest in this, and in order not to have a gap in our representation, I'm sort of inclined for us to go ahead and nominate her to that School Boards Association tonight. I don't know if anybody has any strong feelings either way. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that we nominate Dr. Carmen Gonzalez to be our board member committee representative to the New Mexico School Boards Association.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you very much. Item G. As I mentioned, have two nominations to move forward on behalf of Dr. Gonzalez, one for the CRC, Mr. Dax Contreras, and one for the Audit Committee, Ms. Margot Shirley. So I'll go ahead and make a motion to nominate those two folks respectively to those committees.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Are there any other nominations for?
Madam President?
Yes, Secretary Bozay.
Thank you. I have all three, very thankfully, of my committee appointees agreed to stay on for another term. So I will be nominating Cynthia Sandoval to continue on the Audit Committee, and Ruth Ramos and John Morrison to continue on the CRC.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
And if I could, just again express gratitude for all of the volunteers. These folks all, well, both Cynthia and Ruth, this was their first year serving on their committees, and they both expressed to me this week how much they've learned in the time that they've been on their committee, and that they really were just starting to feel like they were getting the hang of things and looked forward to being more active and involved members in the future. And I just think it's wonderful, and I love seeing that happen in our community. So thank you to our community volunteers.
Good stuff. Anything further? Somebody needs to tell Philip Goodwin to answer my calls and emails. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to board discussion and possible action. I'm just going to go ahead and take the liberty of a very quick update on our reimagining process. Just to say that the superintendent has worked on this. We have really a chief strategist in Dr. Veronica Garcia, who is under contract with the district. She will help work on bringing together a consultant team to do the heavy lifting, the legwork around this of community engagement, and help us think through We are hoping, I think, in early September, we talked about in order to get through the start of school, to bring a more substantial presentation to the board that would look at updating the steering committee compositions, that would look at some of our commitments to the process, which were in some of the previous framework for how we do this reimagining. And just to also say that we are looking into public-private community partnerships around this reimagining. Some of that will take place, of course, on the steering committee, but there are some parties that may be interested in bringing resources to the table to help assist with some of this process. So just wanted to say, because that was a commitment that I had hoped we would be able to bring forward in May. Turns out, you'd think I'd know this by now, but May is a really busy month in the Santa Fe Public Schools. And then we have June, where we need to wrap up a bunch of business, and then take a rest for a minute in July. So this will come back very soon as we reconvene for the new fiscal and school year. Secretary Bose?
I just had another announcement.
Oh, okay,
So
please go ahead.
Unrelated.
Unless you wanted to say something on this point, Board Member Anderson. Okay, Secretary Bose, please.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent. Looking forward to our advanced planning, I knew I was going to forget something during my committee announcements, and that is that the CRC is having an extra meeting next week because the committee discussion at the end of last week's meeting was that they really did not want to delay any further hearing the location study for Mandela International Magnet School. So they requested to receive that presentation next week as it is ready, versus waiting until August. So we will have an extra meeting in June next week regarding the location study for Mandela. Thank you.
Thank you.
Board President Noble.
Yes, go ahead, Board Member Anderson.
Thank you, Board President Noble, members of the board, and Superintendent Chavez. Do we have a next step on redistricting?
Board Member Anderson, Board President Noble, members of the board. Yeah, we're going to come back with a plan, as we mentioned, with Mr. Donarski on how to engage with our community. I actually took the liberty to go on the city website and see what they were doing. It's very similar to what our plans were, virtual town halls, getting that information out, publishing it. So that's something that we're working on, and then I'll work with you individually through the summer to keep you informed of where to find the information and what our next steps are.
Thank you so much.
Anything else on board discussion, possible action? Unless we happen to need a special meeting before the end of June, this will be our last meeting of the fiscal year. And it's been a really great year. And thank you, Superintendent. I was thinking, I don't quite know what to get you for your 1-year anniversary on July 1, but, you know, it's coming pretty soon. And, you know, it's never a dull moment. So thank you, to everybody in the district office, and to everybody in the Santa Fe Public Schools team in our community. We've moved a lot this year, and it feels really good. So with that, there is a CRC meeting, an extra CRC meeting, and an audit committee entrance meeting taking place next week. Anything else for advanced planning?
Just a reminder that we'll work with you on that board retreat early August, as we mentioned previously. And then if I can just add, I was going to say thank you as well. It's a great first year. It's a great team. It's a collaborative unit up here with us. And without that relationship, it would have been much more difficult for us to get through this school year. So we want to say, on behalf of the district and the staff, thank you guys.
Thank you. Anything else at all?
Board President Noble.
Go ahead, Board Member Anderson.
I just wanted to say thank you to the Superintendent of the Cabinet and all the folks who stayed with us tonight. I know it's a late meeting and there was a lot of dense information, so thank you so much.
Madam President.
Secretary Bose.
Thank you. I also would like to say thank you to the superintendent and the team. I feel like we've accomplished some really innovative and wonderful things this year, and I just am so excited about what's going to come next. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. With